We had a little bit of technical difficulty, so we're starting a bit late. But this is our welcome to the June 6th extra policy meeting for those who love policy. We are happy to start the day with our collaborative style meeting with CSE also at the table. And we will begin review of 236. So we will have online comments. This meeting is being recorded. And please put your comments per the topic in the meeting, including your name and like the town where you live in Lower Merion. I will pass it now to Megan to start the meeting. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. As Melanie mentioned, we are going to spend a good...
Sorry. And can I just say, no, sure. Todd is on Zoom as well. Okay. One of our board members. Yeah.
Wonderful. So before we dive into policy AR 236, which will probably be the majority of our time today, we have spent large portions of the last few meetings on this topic, and we feel really good about where it is right now, and we welcome our friends from the Committee for Special Education who are joining us today and have been a critical partner in this work. I just, for the benefit of what we hope to accomplish today and keeping our sort of eye on the clock a bit, we do have policy 134-1, use of generative artificial intelligence in education, is proposed for adoption. We did move that forward for a first read. We're pausing on moving forward with the administrative regulation at this time. It will give us an opportunity this summer with Dr. Ranelli to work on the refinement of that and bring it back in the fall, but it does give us a place to start, and you have seen that administrative regulation, so it's sort of operating guidance for us right now, and so more to come in the fall. A couple of items that you see under first readings, as well as the top of the administrative regulations, which is the federal fiscal compliance, conflict of interest, and parent and family engagement. These are some adjustments and revisions that we need to make as it relates to some technical changes in the law, making sure our verbiage is correct. So we will be reviewing that today. It's sort of a compliance matter, so we do need to move forward with what's there. But in the fall, if there's interest in the committee to revisit it more fully, we certainly could do that. Student activities, we're excited to bring that to conclusion in this meeting with the AR being finalized. And the access to district facilities is an adjustment to some of the rates that we do annually and some additional adjustments that we are proposing this year for some users. So we'll get to that hopefully, and that will complete the agenda for today. I'm going to hand it over to Kimberly Frazier for that first part.
Good morning. Thank you for having us here today. Kimberly Frazier, Director of Student Services. I have a couple slides to kind of lead us into the latest version of our policy and administrative regulations. And I just want to acknowledge people that are in the room with us. I think as I go through the slides and we talk a little bit, I may be speaking to you, but there are voices of many that I'm speaking for, and that we've had a lot of collaboration to get to the product we are at today. And although they can't all be in this room, because actually there is quite a large amount of collaboration in this, we do have some representatives here with us today. In the audience, we have two of our special education supervisors, Gwen Nardowitz and Dr. Stephanie Doyle, and then with me at the table here, I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves.
Hi everybody, Melissa Gibson, lead supervisor of special education, early intervention through age 22. And then as you all know, I say my day job, grades 10 through 12 plus, at the high school level, supervisor of special education.
Robin Gowrie, Committee of Special Education.
Lindsay Wickman, I'm Vice President for the Committee for Special Education.
Sarah Arva Grasick, Committee of Special Education.
Kara Herman, who's the president of CSC. She's on Zoom. She has had a current health issue ongoing, and so she was unable to make it today.
So just a quick update, kind of like where we've been since we were here together a month ago. We took all of the input and feedback that we received from the last policy meeting and updated the draft. It was that working draft then that we pushed out to all of our partners to have additional review. And so to take it from there and do additional review and revisions. So we worked really closely with the Committee for Special Education again. We have our special education focus groups. We also did a staff survey to get input on that product. And I'm gonna, in the next slide, I talk a little bit about that staff survey. We sent it to those most directly impacted and involved with Policy 236, our building administrators, our special education teachers, our related service providers, which would be our speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and our BCBAs, and our special education support staff, instructional assistants, behavior aides, job coaches. Through that survey, we had 127 of our team members respond. And in the survey, they had to identify their grade level that they support predominantly. And it was interesting, it was even representation across all 3 levels, so I was glad to see that. The way the survey was structured, respondents were asked to review the proposed draft section by section and give feedback. And the first question was, do you believe that it is acceptable as written, or do you think there needs to be revisions? It was largely reflected strong support that there didn't need to be any additional revisions. And the lowest percent of consent was 90% on the definitions. And then the others were at least 93 to 98%, where team members endorsed the section as written and didn't have additional feedback. We did get a lot of good feedback through that. We reviewed through every comment that was made, suggestion that was made. When you do surveys like that, there was a lot of input that was given that was more informative for administration about implementation, not necessarily about the administrative regulations themselves. But we did get a lot of good feedback. It's reflected in here, staff voice. An example, we didn't specifically call out elopement in clear and present danger. A staff member identified that, so we included that in. We had, under training, the suggestion about making sure that training also includes ongoing consultation with our BCBAs. We reflected that. So we had some really good input from staff. It was helpful to be able to do that survey. We also consulted with an expert in the field. Dr. David Bateman reviewed the policy, met with administration to talk through his review of that. Dr. Bateman is a well-recognized, respected professional in this field. He serves as a special education consultant and actually is a researcher as well. But he has a lot of experience that relates to this work. He started as a special education teacher and supported a variety of disability types. He was a building administrator. He was a professor teaching courses in special education. He's a former due process hearing officer, so he was really deep in the work of looking at what is required under IDEA and PA school code for IEPs and IEP implementation. He oversaw over 580 due process hearings. He's an author and has co-authored books, and he's often a keynote speaker. He's utilized nationally, so we feel really fortunate that we have someone who is local but an expert that could support with this work. Through that consultation, which was really helpful, what Dr. Bateman highlighted is that the intent of the policy is really clear, and that as written promotes positive behavior interventions and supports consistent with legal requirements. He emphasized that we did a nice job, least restrictive environment, sorry I put the abbreviation, didn't spell it out, and safety are prioritized, and really emphasizing that we need to educate students in the least restrictive environment while ensuring safety. He also commended us on the family and interagency collaboration and that emphasis on cooperation among all parties, school, family, community, partner. He had good suggestions for some revisions that you will see reflected within this particular update. some of the things that I can highlight, some are minor. They're like language changes that do make a difference, right? If you look, we're proposing to retitle the policy, positive behavioral supports for students receiving special education. So again, just further emphasizing like the positive language. We talked about seclusion. We added a footnote related to seclusion. We don't use seclusion in Lower Merion, but nationally the people do see that. So his suggestion to just make sure we make note of it as prohibited and define that in a footnote. So we did that. So you'll see throughout some of the revisions that he made. Another suggestion he made that you'll see, he recommended doing an appendix where we show what we report on for restraint reporting. So we have a form that we use that every time a restraint happens, the team fills it out. They give it to me, and that's what I report to PDE. So we included that so everyone can see what's actually reported, which aligns with feedback we've received from families too about transparency with that. So after today, we're going to do a second part of the education series where we talk about the revised policy and administrative regulation with our target audience being parents and guardians, so that we can say, here's what you can expect, here's what you'll see and experience. The guide for special education and related student supports, we always intend to do an annual update. So we're talking about how do we incorporate more about this policy within that guide for families and staff. And then our implementation plan for this upcoming year, including the staff training that's going to need to be done. So before we just step in up quickly, I know that a lot of people have participated in every meeting that we've talked about this, but for anybody who's new with us, just a very brief reminder that this is really about collective responsibility. It's not just about the special education team. This is about our community, our administrators, our general education staff, our support staff, every department, transportation included in that, facilities, that we're responsible for ensuring that all children are educated in learning environments that are safe, supportive, and responsive to each individual student's needs. And that positive behavior support is a really integral part of that programming. And a reminder as you're looking through this that the policy and administrative regulations are our foundation. And then every student that receives special education services has an individualized education plan that is very specific to what that individual child needs to be able to access and be successful. And so there is then the other layer for families of that individual education plan. So if we look at the most recent version of the policy, that's okay. What I'll do is I'll just go through and highlight some of the key changes for the committee and for the public, and then we can go from there if that's okay. Yep. So related to the policy itself, it's redlined so you can see what the changes are. Again, changing the title of it to be more reflective of positive language, student-first language. Instead of saying special education students, we're saying students who receive special education services, and that positive behavior language. So it's really more language pieces to this particular part. And then when we moved into the first page of the administrative regulations. Next page, yeah. Yep, I'll walk you through it. Based on feedback, we added, it's almost like a table of contents or like a preview so that in one spot, people can see what's forthcoming within the administrative regulation. I think this really will help like orient readers and give a preview for what you're about to see. So this is a new section that we added based on information we received. And then under the definitions, as I already mentioned, we added elopement under clear and present danger. We added, based on the recommendation of Dr. Bateman, the consent for a functional behavior assessment is required. In our district, we do that through a permission to evaluate or reevaluate. So we were explicit, how do we get consent for an FBA? We added in language for sensory spaces that parents have the right to request to view those, to come in and see them. And then we did add a definition related to trauma-sensitive interventions. Under the interventions themselves, again, I already shared that we referenced seclusion, just to make it clear that we don't use seclusion as an intervention in Lower Merion, but to make that very clear to our community that we don't do that. Under training, as I mentioned, again, there's semantics and some word changes. I'm just highlighting the kind of larger substantive things that came out of our collaboration. The training, we added that ongoing consultation. It's true, like our BCBAs don't just come in, train and go, or don't just come in and do an FBA and walk out. They're part of the team and they're constantly consulting, reviewing data with the team, giving additional feedback. So that ongoing consultation is important. It is training, ongoing training. So we added that in. Under the calming room, initially under the calming rooms, there I go, saying, we no longer have a calming room in the district. The recommendation is removal of that. We are doing calming spaces and zones. You're under the stages of intervention. I'm sorry, I'll tell you the page. That's okay. Yep. Page 11. Thank you, 12 in the packet. Thank you. Under the calming zone and space, you see we have phases. Initially, the team had used the language stage, but it was just kind of confusing because we also use stages of intervention. So again, some of it's just like language for clarification, just to make it more clear. So we adjusted that. And again, a reminder to the community that previously we did have a calming room at Marion Elementary, and that is proposed to be removed completely from the administrative regulations and policy. I'll try to give you your page. Page 14 at the bottom, where we talk about a positive behavior support plan. We just added, again, clarification. We explained when a positive behavior support plan is required. So we added a footnote at the bottom of this so that it's really clear when a positive behavior support plan is required. Again, I think that's a good example of how it's really more about clarification in the changes that were made. Mechanical restraints, which is on page 17 in your packet. We just did some language changes here to clarify. And again, that was like based on feedback from staff members about clarification of what a mechanical restraint is or is not. So we did that as well. And then as I shared, we added the appendix to be able to show clearly what's actually recorded and reported when restraints do occur. So questions, feedback?
Do you got questions, feedback? You want to go? Oh, do you have?
I don't really have any questions. I really wanted to say thank you. And as somebody who is not currently touched by this process with my own family, I look at this from the view of an occupational therapist and as a parent generally, and as a community member, and I really appreciate the clarifications because they help, I think, everybody understand, but they also help with fidelity to the actual policy being implemented and carried out as intended and hoped. So I just wanted to say thank you for the time and I know this was a labor of love. And I also appreciate the reaching out to the outside consultant. I think that's a wonderful thing to do, especially in a situation like this where we have a lot of updates to make. So thank you.
Don't worry, Kimberly, I don't have a bunch of questions. I see it in your face. I did want to hear from CSE how you feel the process has gone, if there are other points of feedback or things you want to continue to look at and see what's what.
Great, thank you for the opportunity to speak about that. I did actually want to take a moment to talk about the level of collaboration that CSE has had with student services and special education staff on this AR and policy. We have sat at the table for 2 page-by-page readings of this AR. We discussed language changes, additions, formatting, what to add and what to take away. It was a true partnership.
everything we as a team brought to their attention, they listened and tried to incorporate that into the current draft. In addition, I wrote down all the comments from board members and community members at the last policy meeting, and most, if not all of that feedback was incorporated into the draft before we even sat at the table. The feedback from CSE's own survey has also been included, and I'd just really like to thank the Student Services and Special Education team for the level of collaboration that we had. And I want to be transparent with our community about the amount of involvement that CSE has had in this process. Like Kimberly said, we are one of many, many perspectives that were taken into account in drafting this ARN policy. And I think we've already given our feedback to them based on the previous thing. There's a couple small things that I don't want to take too much time going through, but overall, our feedback has very much been incorporated.
Thank you, Lindsay. Anyone else from Lindsay? No? It's okay. Just checking. Okay, good. Great. I'm so glad to hear that, and I just want to echo thanks for taking it on in this way in a truly collaborative manner. I also really appreciate the steps you took to get staff feedback and doing those surveys, and I'm glad and thank the staff for weighing in on it, because I think then it just makes a stronger policy, and we can all be more invested in when we roll it out for the change management. So just thank you, everyone, for going through it in that way. Todd's on. Todd, do you have anything? You up there?
No, not much. I really respect the process behind this one. I think it was really well done. I think bringing in Brennan was a really smart move. I have no concerns with the policy or the ARs itself, although, you know, it doesn't stop here, right? So, you know, ultimately, no matter what the policy or the AR is, it comes down to a specific interaction between an individual student and an individual teacher. And so reducing this policy to effective practice remains a considerable challenge going forward, and something that we just have to be mindful with appropriate governance and oversight at each step. But this policy itself, I'm very comfortable with. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. So I'll, oh, sorry. Did you have anything else?
No, Amy had just said there was one comment.
But,
yeah.
yeah, I wanted to also just add, I appreciate this with the changes, because I feel like the language is more positive than it used to be, and so we're giving, from the lens of giving kids what they need as opposed to punishing. And also, I appreciate how the training has been oomphed up a bit from my request from last meeting, and I do appreciate that. And I feel like this policy is getting to a point where we can say that any teacher, aide, or staff can feel they can look back and comfortably say they did the right thing at any given moment. And I think that's important. And it's also important that we protect our kids. So I appreciate that all of the work you've gone into to accomplish this. So I did have a couple of questions. I was wondering, in the clear and present danger in section on page 4, and it says that you can make a determination that may be to restraints before there is an action created. And I was wondering, under what lens do you look at when you're making that decision? Is it all about PBIS and that type of thing?
So that's like in the moment where the behaviors of the student in front of you appear to be leading to imminent harm.
Okay.
The elopement is a really good example of that, right? You're going to intervene before a child runs into Montgomery Ave.
Right.
Right? So that's a good example of that before it happens intervention.
Yeah, and that's what I was just trying to understand. So it's more of like just like the training
Exactly.
and experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. The other part I think that we don't, that's important is that it's usually a team that's involved. And so you have multiple trained team members who are supporting and making those decisions about what's best for the student in the moment.
Thank you. The other question I had was on calming spaces, and not necessarily the language, it's more so, I had a parent ask me about, they had a student in a high school setting who was finding trouble finding spaces like that, and I don't know in what year context they were talking about, and I'm wondering, have we increased that at all? Are we planning to create more spaces at the middle and high school level to meet the needs of the students?
Yeah, I'm not sure when they experienced that, but certainly over the past few years, our high schools have really evolved with the spaces that they have for students to be able to relax, take time, chill out, if you will, at the high school level, right? And then within our classrooms themselves, especially our emotional support classrooms, you're going to see varieties of sensory calming spaces, areas for the students to just kind of take their time, regulate themselves, and get back into the setting. The same thing exists within our autistic support classrooms, our life skills classrooms, and our learning support classrooms also have sensory items, maybe locations. Usually you'll see like a book nook, like they'll have like a little area for kids to chill out in a nice chair or something like that. Lighting is different. Lots of different things are going on in both high schools at this time, yeah.
That's great to hear, because, I mean, I know from the ISL, they become spaces from, I know my daughter and her friends who had ISL teachers, that was their go-to spot when they needed something, so I do appreciate that. Again, thank you for all you're done. I'll open it up. Does anybody that's present would like to speak? Come on up, Colleen.
Colleen Bertrand Winwood, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for all the hard work that's gone into this process and for your ongoing commitment to education in our community. I want to acknowledge many changes that have been made since we reviewed the policy in May, and I appreciate incorporating all the feedback. And I don't speak for all parents, but I do bring 18 years of lived experience parenting 3 children with IEPs across Lower Merion School District, Falls Church City Public Schools in Virginia, and then Grayson, Stratford Friends, and Delaware Valley Friends School. So I have experience, and I've seen how bumpy this road can be, which is to be expected when we're doing the sacred and complex work of educating children. People are messy and wonderful. We hear a lot about preparing our kids for a competitive world, and at times I've worried that there might not be a place for my kids in that kind of world. But I acknowledge that fear as a parent can lead me to become hypercritical or overly focused on rigor. And when we're caught up in our own lives, parents can unconsciously outsource knowing to experts and others. And when I look at the world today, I don't want my parenting or our schools to mold my children into what is happening in the world. I actually want something better for them and for the future. So how do I know that I have an ally in my kids' education? It's when a teacher or staff member reflects my child's strengths and struggles with candor and care. It's when they reach out when there's a problem, or they respond with openness when I reach out to them. It's when they share their expertise in a way that I can understand and they invite me to share my perspective. It's really beyond the words, and it's beyond being perfect. What inspires trust for me is when there is a mistake, and then we hold dilemmas together and we work through it. It's really the how, not being perfect. And it's not about saying yes to everything. Actually, when someone says a very clear no, or I don't think that's the right thing, I can really respect that, and I can trust. I've had those moments, but too few of them have been at Lower Merion, to be honest. And I don't believe it's because the people here aren't capable or don't care. I really don't. At the last meeting, I raised concerns about ignoring power dynamics, a lack of transparency in fragmentation in policy creation and implementation. I really appreciate Todd's comment about implementation. Those concerns remain, and so do my requests. A multi-stakeholder process for shaping and implementing policy or regulations or implementation using dialogue methods. Some examples include future search, theory U, appreciative inquiry. Clarity on the intended outcomes of the policy. What are we working toward? And how would we know if we're on track or if we're getting closer or further away from those outcomes or goals? Clear guidance in training that distinguishes between punitive and protective use of force. And when restraint is used, how do we mitigate its harmful effects and what kind of follow-up occurs? And finally, I did email Dr. Rinelli, and I hope that request would be considered. And I thank you so much for your time and for listening and for your service to our community and our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Okay. Is anybody else like to speak who's present? No. And there's one comment online.
Tanya Schreiber from Penn Win would like to ask, will Whistler Pearlstein review and approve the final draft before the vote? Collaboration is wonderful, but it's also important to make sure the solicitors review this and ensure it aligns with the most recent state and federal laws.
Yes, Whistler Pearlstein has reviewed it, has been involved from the outset, and we are extremely comfortable that this policy 100% complies with applicable law, particularly the 22 PA Code 711.46 on positive behavior support.
Thank you, Ken. I see we had a new member, just a community member walk in. Not to put you on the spot, do you have,
That's okay. That's okay. We have a comment over here.
Oh, we have a comment over here? Okay, thank you. Oh.
I'm Lindsay Wickman again with the CSE, and I just had a couple things that I kind of wanted to pull out. After the comment about calming spaces, I just wanted to ask if this is a shift, and if so, should students be given an opportunity to view these spaces and kind of talk through them, or is this more reflective of what's currently happening at schools?
It's reflective of what's happening at schools.
I also wanted to mention that we have heard feedback from teachers wanting de-escalation training who aren't necessarily on the front line. And so I wanted to get some information about whether or not that's an option and if every teacher shouldn't have this tool in their toolbox.
Yes, what I'm excited about, like this, getting here today and getting to this point was a lot of work, right? And we have a lot of work ahead of us. I think the work continues. Part of that is that implementation plan, and that's about all staff. Again, we've repeatedly talked about collective responsibility. If we believe that and we really expect that of every team member, then we're responsible for making sure they have the skills and the training that they need to be able to do that effectively. So yes, that is part of it.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I mean, I'd like to see how we can better take a lot of these things are great stuff that can work in general ed. And I mean, the positive slant, the giving kids what they need as opposed to punishing lens. And I would love to see, and also, do we have restraints policy for general ed at all, or AR or any?
So in policy 235, there's reference to, and I think we mentioned this in a prior meeting, and it's probably worth just saying again, is that in moments where there's a clear and present danger in any circumstance, there is language about use of like force to ensure, like to quell, the threat of harm, and that applies just generally to any staff member. So it's not a restraint per se, you're not going to see that word, but language that relates to, and looks like Ken may be pulling it up so we can look at it directly, but that relates to the, what all staff is empowered to do when it's necessary to do so. And that's one of the distinctions that we want to make sure we're messaging together with the training we've been talking about, like when is it applicable to all students? What are the specific parameters that we're talking about here? So
Yeah, and I kind of, I mean, it comes down to training again, and like de-escalation techniques are probably more helpful, yeah. Okay, so, oh, one more.
Sorry, just a couple more things. We brought this up in our conversation with student services and special education, but I just kind of wanted some clarity as well, because a question that has come up is what happens when a peer witnesses a restraint, and whether parents are notified in that situation, and what is done now, and if anything will be changed, and whether more language should be in the policy about that. And I have one more after that.
I think, yes, it is in place now. Our teams are very clear on looking at when situations happen, you have to, it's almost the same lens of like crisis response. You have to look at not just the individuals that are directly involved, but anyone who might be impacted by that situation, and make sure supportive measures are put into place. When the restraints happen, we have talked a lot about preserving the dignity of the student, and part of that is trying to remove them from the sight of their peers, because that can be, damaging, harmful for both. And so teams work really hard clearing the classroom, clearing the hallways, moving peers away from that. And again, that's about protecting the dignity of the student and minimizing the impact on others. So it is.
go ahead. I don't want to.
No, you're good.
So to your question, though, about like the impact of other students, I think we tried to address it because we did talk about it that day, which is on page 17, that paragraph that talks about after the use of a restraint, ... That's me saying ... That's not in the AR. We'll meet to debrief and discuss necessary supportive student measures for all involved / impacted. So that would include students, staff, others. So that's how we framed it, but it was to address that issue you raised, which was a good one.
Yep, and I did see that. I guess the lingering question is whether or not parents get a notification if their student has witnessed a situation like this.
I think that would be part of the consideration of who's impacted, and if a student's impacted typically, and we can spell that out, I think that's more of an internal process rule of then who needs to be notified. And often when we are talking to students or providing supports to students, regardless of like whether they were directly impacted by a restraint or they were an observer, we typically do a follow-up with parents. But that to me is what's intended to be meant by anyone that's impacted, inclusive of families.
Can I ask another question related, sir? How do you mitigate the fact that like some students may see the start of something, but then they don't see the end? But then there's the gossip and all the mitigate all the stuff that actually then creates a big harder for that student who was having the behavioral experience. So I wonder, how do we mitigate that? Or is it, can you mitigate that?
I think we talk a lot about like the impact of an incident that gets legs. Sometimes we talk about that. How does it get legs? How does it spread? How does it get misinterpreted, misinformed? And we do, try to triage that because we don't want it to become something more than it is. And that's why it's important to address the students who are direct observers and make sure that they're comfortable and understand, and try to back to like the core of it is protecting the dignity of the student involved. So when we hear, and I just use this broadly, not just for a restraint as it relates to this, but when we hear of an incident and we know it's getting legs, is trying to identify those students who are key communicators in maybe not a positive way, and addressing those situations. So it's always about ultimately trying to protect the student that's at the core, the victim that's at the core of a situation, but it's, you know, there's not a perfect science that I'm aware of to doing that, but we are vigilant, I think, in trying to do that follow-up as best we can.
Could restorative practices come into the?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like identifying and then addressing, so.
Yeah, okay, okay, thanks.
Lindsay, sorry, can I ask, when you're asking the question, are you hearing from parents or community members that hasn't been the lived experience? Not as a gotcha, just like want to unearth the...
I wouldn't say that. I think there's been feedback from situations that have happened at the school level where maybe parents wanted some feedback from the school and didn't receive it, given what their student witnessed during the day. I mean, no one's coming to us and saying that their child has witnessed a restraint and nothing's happening as a result of that. But I think the question is, there's some gray area there, right? And like, at what point is a parent notified given what has happened in that situation, in order for that parent to be able to have conversations and support that student after the school day?
Yeah, that's the piece that really struck a chord with me when you said that. I mean, my own daughter still references a situation that happened in elementary school about a specific classmate, and there had been incidents leading up. So it just also makes me think of our teacher training around cultural competencies and all of the integration of those, the processes we already have in place. And I don't know the curriculum close enough to understand how much we emphasize special education students and their needs, but it could be something to consider. To your point, Lindsay.
Agreed. My last point was similar to Todd's, which is we're getting lots of questions from our community members about what happens after this policy is policy. They're wanting to know how we measure the success of this policy and whether it's working. So I just kind of wanted to reiterate that kind of thread of the conversation.
Yeah, and I that's this work here, and then implementation plan and ensuring follow-up and the gathering of, you know, that again, that feedback that we've so diligently gathered up to this point shouldn't stop with implementation. I think it's about making sure that after we're implementing it, that people are clear on what the implementation plan is, so that you know what steps we're taking. And that we're getting feedback after the implementation from those partners that we've been working with about how is it in practice, is it being supportive, are families experiencing it as it's written?
I have a little comment to add to that, if that's okay. I think I agree, and identifying the trends that might be seen could be helpful as well as we talk about how to address and mitigate sort of overall. So not just collecting the feedback, but trying to kind of really get a picture of what's happening as opposed to individual, you know, incidents at a time.
Yeah, what's hard is, like, we talked about on that last slide that I put up, right? It's highly individualized too. And so just giving, you know, just looking at data on X number of restraints have occurred is not telling, right? Because it's really individual students, what they might be going through at a particular moment in time. And so it's important about thinking, you know, that it is highly individualized too.
In response to that, or just a question in response, how, you talked about last time, like when you do have an incident where you need to respond to a student having a behavioral experience, that you do a debriefing afterwards. Is it recorded anywhere, like the not necessarily with a name, but just what happened, this place, so that you can, if you see any patterns happening over and over and over, and I'm saying like from a district-wide kind of sense?
So this is actually an area where we really refined that in this version of the administrative regulations. The one from 2012 did not talk about the debriefing, but what we've seen in practice is that our teams that do that faithfully are the most successful in terms of helping to support students with reducing the number of restraints that are needed. So what we wanted to do is incorporate it here. Part of our district practices moving forward for our teams is requiring that debriefing. We will be developing like 8 questions to kind of answer in that debriefing session to help guide that conversation, with all intention of being instructive for that team that was involved. Because again, the work that we do through a student's IEP is about trying to reduce the need for physical management procedures. And so really doing that debriefing is an important part of it. So it will be more so now moving forward than it was previously.
And yeah, and I guess even in the classroom, when things escalate, I mean, that even almost is a situation where if to just get it before it happens is what I would love to see. More, yeah, for lack of a better way to put it. Okay. No, is there anybody else? Did you have more no? Is there another one online? Okay.
Related to the topic, I would say, Juanita Kerber of Ardmore, I heard from a community member whose child is both gifted and has ADHD with challenges with staying in their seat. They wanted feedback on the ways to help their child in a supportive capacity in school. So I think it sounds like a community member looking for next step guidance.
Yeah, without knowing the specifics, I hear gifted, I hear 504, I hear ADHD, that may be an IEP, but it also may be a 504. So my recommendation to that family would be to either reach out to your school counselor or the student's case manager, because that's going to be the person that's best going to be able to give specific strategies and support for their child.
Okay, are we okay to move on to the next one? Okay. Well, thank you all. I appreciate it. Thanks. So next is generative artificial intelligence.
Excuse me, just to be clear, you can now move this on for adoption at the board meeting. Even though there were changes, they weren't changes that would prevent you from moving on for an
I thought this
adoption.
was the AR. Do we?
The policy.
Well, the policy has changes too.
Oh, the policy has changes?
It's just that one page.
Just the one page. Are we okay to move the policy changes forward?
For
Yeah.
adoption.
Okay, for adoption, yeah. Thank you all.
Okay. Moving on, thank you, everyone. I think that's a great example of a collaborative effort and a good outcome for at least the policy piece of it, and more to come. The next item on our agenda, which given the time that we have and given how much time we could be talking about this particular topic, which is the use of generative artificial intelligence in education, I'd propose, because we have spent some time on it, it's, from our standpoint, ready for adoption, with the caveat that this isn't like the last stop for this, and when we bring back the AR in the fall, we'll have an opportunity to look at it together with the policy, because inevitably there'll probably be some cleanup that we want to do to make sure they mirror each other. But for now, I think it's really important to establish some guidance from the standpoint of where the board is from a governance lens, and our staff, I think, will feel comforted in knowing that it's not a ban, and that our work is how do we do this in service of students and what their needs are for the world that we're living in now and the world that they'll be working in the future. So there hasn't been, other than the minor change that you see in the first paragraph, any other revisions to this since we last looked at it, but I open it up for any further comments.
Thanks for this, because I agree with it, that we need to have some kind of parameters in place to help the teachers with guidance, even though this is like a top-level review kind of thing. So I'll pass it to my board members if they have anything to add.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions as I was looking through this, and especially for the cross-references. So I was trying to look through the policies that exist already with regard to acceptable use policy or agreement, and that's a caveat. What's the difference between an acceptable use agreement versus policy? Because it looks like we have an AUA versus an AUP for different things, and I just was curious what the difference is in terms of action. So policy 350 looks like it's the acceptable use agreement for, I believe it's for staff. And that could be something to cross-reference just in terms of how AI is going to be impacting what we're using. And again, just clarifying policy versus agreement there, if it needs to be changed or not. And ensuring that when we go through all of our sort of hoped for, outcomes in having this policy, that we're considering that ultimately we are the auspices under which this would be used. If this is a student or a staff using on a device that's ours, we should make it very clear that we have, nothing is private and personal when you're using, when this is district-wide.
Well, an acceptable use policy is what the district's policy is on what constitutes acceptable use. The acceptable use agreement is the document everybody signs. So what you're seeing under that policy 350 is just basic. It's actually AR 350 is a form for people to acknowledge and accept that they've read the acceptable use policy.
But perhaps it could be cross-referenced just as a reminder and a reinforcement that you've signed this policy, you've signed this agreement, and that this is it, because I don't see it listed.
Yeah, that's what I thought, like where you started and when the final part of what you said is we missed 350, and I agree with you on that. So because this is intended to cover staff use as well, so we can certainly add that to the
That's the thesis of what I was saying, yeah.
But you made some other good points too. I just know that in my mind that was something that we overlooked, or I overlooked, and we'll add that.
Thank you. And I have another question, which is sort of different from the policy we just looked at, but having sort of expert guidance considered as we try to draft this policy for ourselves, since this is, I'll speak for myself, not my wheelhouse. And I think it would be great to consider who we could, marry minds with as we do this. We have people in our community that could be really helpful.
Yeah, and there are certainly a lot of interesting options locally, nationally, and we've been connected with, and I think, in terms of like the vetting we did with this policy with positive behavior supports, it's certainly one that would add value, I imagine, to do it in partnership with a consultant or two or other experts in the field. We have some, outstanding teacher leaders who have been here and are really in the work and are helping us monitor the situation. They've created an internal think tank for us to get together and talk about just use cases. And there's also a Montgomery County Intermediate Unit think tank that convened. And I share all that because I think everyone's in the process of gathering who are those experts and where are we going to get the best guidance in the moment and moment by moment. But I also wanted to share, because I participated in that IU think tank, we're not alone in where we are, so there's some comfort, right, in knowing that we're all sort of dealing with the same questions and procedures, but we are learning from each other as well. So, like I said, this is not the final, I don't imagine this to be the final version of this, and so as we get to take a deeper dive into the administrative regulation, we certainly will reach out to have more, consultant, community staff involvement in that.
I don't have any adjusting feedback. I just propose that we move this ahead so that staff has time over the summer when things are a little slower to really dig into the ARs. Yeah.
We'll call you in Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think from what you're saying too, we need to keep this, it's a industry that's moving so quickly and changing so quickly that we need to keep it kind of a little bit vague to be able to meet anything that might be, because it says we have to reasonably anticipate. So I think to reasonably anticipate, we have to be somewhat vague and generalized in certain definitions or to meet future changes that might come up. Yeah. Todd, do you have anything to add?
Nope, all good, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so, and that, now it's time, any community members who would like to speak? Come on up to the podium and just state your name and where you live in Lower Mary.
Hi everybody, my name is Aviva Light. I'm the parent of a Kenwood Elementary student. I'm also a professional in this field. I'm a Forbes columnist. I write about AI.
Can you state where you live?
Sure, I live in Bala Kenwood.
Yeah, thank you.
Right by Kenwood Elementary, like everybody else in the neighborhood, right? And so I'm really interested in what the district is doing, and Abby was kind enough to share a copy of this policy with me a couple months ago, and I'm not sure what the cadences of the board with respect to reviewing this before the school year. But a lot of people don't know what they don't know about AI, and students know a lot more about AI than adults, right? So I just wanted to just emphasize a couple of points that the board may want to consider before the school year with respect to academic integrity issues that could arise with students. So one is that students can create digital twins. So if there's any kind of online discussions, they could create, something to actually show up for them. If there's a virtual day, they could create a Zoom avatar to show up to meetings. And these may be things that you already know, but I do think it's useful for students because they don't really know what's right and what's wrong as far as ethics. I think it's really important for us as school leaders to set the tone for, hey, we know you can do this and this is acceptable use. And then also just with respect to generative AI use, there's some research that came out, and I just published about it today, about how about 1 in 5 are using generative AI for higher order thinking. So how might we incorporate generative AI to help students with higher order thinking in the curriculum? And then, of course, there's AI fluency and the need for people to be AI fluent. So how might we think about incorporating this into what the district is already offering for its students, particularly on the middle and high school levels? So those are just a few comments that I have. I'm happy to be a resource and support, and I just wanted to come and introduce myself. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Interesting to hear what that study was.
What's that?
Well, afterwards, I'd like to hear what that study was you're referencing, if it could. Thanks. Is there anybody else who would like to speak to this policy? Okay, on the line.
Kara Herman from Bala Kenwood, who's president of the CSC, commenting on Abby's call out about marrying minds, gentle reminders to include an individual or organization with knowledge of AI and special needs, students and teachers. AI is an emerging technology with a lot of use in the area of special education.
Thank you, Kara. So we're good to move this policy forward if there's nothing? Okay. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. But we're not done, I know. Next on our agenda are, and I'd like to take them as a grouping, which is policy AR 257, policy 827, and AR 621.1. Okay, Ken, if I put you on the spot to talk a little bit about that. Before you do, I'll just preview. What you'll see in front of you in terms of the changes, the Title I parent-family member engagement policy in AR is subject to routine review. In this case, there was language that needed to be updated to conform with practice, but also legal compliance. And so we need to take these steps so that we make sure that the language is compliant. And this is an area where we do get audited, so there are dot I's, cross T's type of language that we need to make sure is present in our policies, which is, and I'll give an example of that. I think it's the, page 57, conflict of interest. You'll just see a minor adjustment to that policy at page 61, which gives some specific direction around report in writing to the federal awarding agency or PAT. So it just required that technical level of detail as it relates to the language in the reporting section. Similarly, in the AR 621.1, the federal fiscal compliance allowability of costs on page, oh gosh, what page is it on? Page 65 of your packet, it appears that the language or the phrase state and local policies was missing. So we've added that, and that's the only revision to the AR, just to make sure we're in that in compliance. And as I said at the beginning of the meeting, if we'd like to revisit any of these in the fall, we certainly could do so and have a, more broad-based conversation about them.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No. And any questions? No. I just had one quick question on, I'm wondering why under definitions, while we're deviating from our usual parent, guardian, I guess, and family members.
Parent and family, I think that's the way that it's framed in the.
So this language is from the overarching legislation that's.
Yes, that's my
Okay.
understanding, is that
Okay.
this is the recommended language. And at some point, we can crosswalk, maybe like that also applies to like the family or parent guardian, which you're accustomed to seeing here, right?
Yeah.
To include families. So we can, because this is an AR, we can, as we finalize it, see if there's any footnoting we could do to make sure that it crosswalks with our practice.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, Todd, any comments?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody in the community in the audience? No? Okay, online? Okay, so, this is, what reading are we? First reading? First reading.
Policy goes for first reading. The AR can be enacted immediately, so that way we have it for compliance purposes with the audit. For 827 is a first reading, and the AR 621.1 is immediately in effect.
Okay. So we haven't got to 621.1 yet. So
Megan covered it in her.
Oh, did she? Okay.
It's just, we're adding the two words, state and local.
Oh, okay.
3 words, state.
Oh, okay, that one. Okay, so we've got policy AR 257 and policy 27, moving that forward for first reading. Are we okay with that? And 621. I'm going to do that. Oh, that's administrative reg. Yeah. Yeah, so we're good with that. And then, and we have no further questions on the AR, I guess. Yeah.
All right, next topic, student activities, which begins on page 71. This has been also a labor of love, although all of them are for me. This particular one ties to some revisions and updates that we did connected to like trying to bring under an umbrella the student athletics, student activities, and provide some guidance that we all sort of craved, largely to memorialize our practices, but to ensure consistency, give staff, families, students a place to go to see like this is what we mean when we're doing these things and what we intend to do. One of the things that more recently evolved in these conversations was the distinction between student activities that are formally recognized in terms of staffing and budget and all of those things versus a student-led opportunity, which is often an emerging activity. And how do we support that? Because we see a lot of value in identifying interest of students that may not, be aligned with what we already have in terms of the range of club options, which there are many, and we talked about that earlier this year. So that was sort of the major shift that we did, and incorporating some language that relates to those student-led opportunities as an appendix, which is found on page 77. So although it's not all underlined, all of the appendix is new because we wanted to distinguish that from the student activities. And then you can see some of the other minor revisions that we added based on conversations we had at the table and some internal discussions. So we'd love to move this forward. Again, it's largely what we have in practice, but the benefit is now everyone can see what those practices are.
Sorry, I was reading. Thank you. Any questions from board members?
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you. So on page 75 of the packet, under oversight and compliance, I appreciate that this was added in addition to following district policy, regulations, and school rules. Schools may require student activities and lead opportunities to adhere to specific guidelines related to publicity, meeting times, and expectations. This is sort of a question, really, more than a suggestion. Is it something we should include? Should we include social media? Because social media is used sometimes with publicity, and then there are certain rules around how that happens. Or do we want to explicitly say no social media as I think that publicity is vague.
It's intended to include that, but I could put it in in parens and say including but not limited to social media.
Yeah.
It's intended to include that.
I would appreciate that. I think as I was thinking about it, since that all happens in the cloud and doesn't necessarily happen, in tangible form, it could be helpful to clarify that it's included.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, because some people look at publicity of certain things and knowing,
and
people have different definitions for publicity.
And who's managing those accounts, and who gets approval of what gets put out and what gets when.
Yeah, yes, we'll make that adjustment.
That's it? Okay. I don't, thank you for this. I mean, we have gone through this numerous times and had all the meetings with the activities people. So I do appreciate all that's gone into this. I don't have any further. Do you, Anna? Todd, did you have anything you would like to ask for a comment?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so, we have one community member, sorry.
Hi, Michelle Vessel, Gladwin. I don't know if it's part of this meeting, but at the bottom on page 71 at the top, one at the bottom, where it just says that, however, they're not subject to the same level of oversight or resource allocation as board-approved programs. I just want to understand that, because reading student-led opportunities, it says they don't have the same oversight. So I'm just wondering how oversight is managed for student-led activities. What kind of oversight they have and how much oversight they have.
Well, if you look at its Appendix A, Appendix A lists in detail pretty much the amount of oversight there's going to be.
So where is that?
Page 77.
Okay, so on 77, does it say on here, because it says may be supported by parent, guardian, staff, or community volunteers in these initiatives. And then it says on the bottom, sponsorship and supervision. And it was changed to designated or approved by the applicable building principal. So I was under the impression it was the athletic director. So I thought the athletic director was in charge of appointing or who is the teacher or staff or person who's giving the oversight to these activities. And I could be wrong, but that was my understanding before. And when they,
Isn't that different from school to school? Some, we have an athletic director does both, and then we have athletic and activities directors at some schools too. Yeah.
because
Yeah,
here
there's
it
a
says
couple questions
principal.
coming at me. Can I ask you to pause and I'll try to
Yeah,
answer
yeah,
a couple?
sorry.
And then we'll, just to add some clarity. So just to start with the level of oversight, and I think it's important to just point out in that appendix on page 77, before you even get to sponsorship and supervision,
Yeah.
like the intent is to protect the safety and well-being of all participants. So like that's, regardless of whether it's lesser oversight, we're still committed to ensuring that we're protecting the safety and well-being of students. So as you read the next piece of that, an adult volunteer designated or approved by the applicable building principal, and it should say or designee, that ultimately building principals are responsible for those that they supervise, including but not limited to the director of athletics and activities. And as you pointed out, at the high school level, we have directors of athletics and activities, so they do both. At the middle level, it's directors of athletics, so.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was referring to,
Yeah.
high school. Okay,
Yep.
yeah,
So-
okay. So if there was something, we would reach out to the principal or find out if it's the athletic director who's in charge of that?
If it relates to a student-led opportunity?
Yeah.
I guess it would depend on the concern, but they would ultimately fall under an activity in terms of supervision.
So you would reach out to the principal if you had a question about it, or the athletic director?
So, and this is why we're trying to, maybe that in doing this distinction is causing a little confusion, but ultimately the student-led opportunities are like emerging activities. So they would largely be managed, so to speak, under the director of athletics and activities.
Right, okay.
Who reports to the principal. So there's a tiering of like responsibility. So the first point of contact should be the individual who's supervising that activity, and then from there would be the director of athletics and activities. And we can clarify that. This isn't intended to be the easy reference guide either, but we'll make sure that that's clear to families in distinguishing the two and who would be responsible.
Okay.
Is that something we're going to have on the websites or in the student handbooks and things like that?
Yeah, I think what we want to do is take this and make it a user-friendly resource for families, and this being sort of the underpinning of that work.
Can I just add that in the Pathways for Effective Communication document that's on the website for athletics and activities, step 1 is the coach or advisor, step 2 is the athletic director or assistant principal, step 3 is the principal. So that is delineated on the website, the order of contact.
And so also, just because like I'm just looking at this now, so I haven't read it, and I know it's like very general. So is there more specific guidelines for these student-led activities? Is that going to be something you're going to look at, like for vetting speakers who come in and things like that? Will there be like actual guidelines to go by in any kind of policy, or do we already have that?
I mean, in terms of the rules that, I mean, all of our policies apply to, are incorporated by reference for these activities, whether they be student-led activities, whether they be student activities, whether they be athletics, which are also incorporated into, and also incorporate the local school rules, which would be found in handbooks. So as far as the procedures go that exist now at the building level, they're not incorporated here, but that would be, building-based, like a process for approving resources. And that's why we wanted to call attention to, that provision that Abby pointed out earlier under section 11 on page 75, which is to say, beyond what's said here, there's opportunity for the schools to create more specific rules as it relates to approval of whatever a club wants to do, whether it be needing transportation to go to, and a museum or whatever the case may be. There are a lot of rules that aren't going to be found in the AR that would be local to the school.
So can I just ask you one last question? Because I was looking when all those issues were coming up for speakers, and there was like a lot of controversy going on. I couldn't find anything or any guidelines to be used to vet speakers that come here. So is that in the building, or, I'm just curious. Because I didn't know if that was something that needed to be looked at for policy?
Well, I think
or
that's.
Is it something that already exists?
Yeah, and I think that's part of, if I go back to like,
Yeah.
my personal interest in getting some framework down is
Yeah.
that we start to refine those practices at the building level, so we bring some consistency, and where there's a lack of clarity, I think we all, our staff, that, I'll speak for staff, want that clarity of what that expectation is. And once we have this guidance in place, it allows us to build in, clearer rules, including but not limited to how to do student-led or student activities, access speakers, or access other resources, or access transportation. So that's still part of the ongoing work that we're doing. So I don't want to say something that may not be true, because you're asking for something very specific, and I'm taking a broader answer for you. And maybe offline we can talk about that a little bit more, because I don't want to be, I don't want to say something that someone interprets like in a different way.
Correct.
And I think
No,
you have a
and I'm
specific
sorry,
ask.
I'm just asking because I just wanted to know, because I'm looking at this and I'm just wondering, is this the only policy? Because I didn't know if there was
Yeah,
a
you
policy
asked
that
it.
existed, or if
Yeah.
it's something that's going on in the schools. Because I think, personally, I think there isn't enough oversight over student-led activities, like all of them, like to avoid any problems to occur. I think there has to be clearer guidelines, because I don't even know if the actual building principals know. That's all I'm asking. So
You know,
if
I
it's
think
something you're looking.
these are good questions, and because this is new, like we didn't have any of this
Yeah.
language, so I think, I just want to say, like, this is the step that we're
start of
taking, and I also think, like, in the conversations we've had over this year is, we offer a range of activities, and we try to honor student voice and opportunities, and create a variety of those opportunities for students. So, and we want to make sure that it's done in a safe way, that that it aligns with all of our other policies, including but not limited to, like, anti-discrimination policies and things like that. So, I think we're getting there, and I'm hopeful that this gives us a really nice runway to continue to build consistency into our practices.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any comments online?
Just popped up. Michelle McGill of Bala-Cynwyd, please make sure that we do not allow parents to run our student clubs. We need to ensure that our administrators are allowed to make decisions that are in the best interest of all students. Please keep in mind that our students are young adults and capable of having difficult conversations in a respectful manner.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay. Any other questions, like we're good to move along? Okay, so I think there's one last one you're trying to get through before.
Well, just to be clear, this one will be, there's going to be adding the cross-references. We're going to adding where it says applicable building principal or their designee, and we're going to add the social media piece to the guidelines, and then otherwise it's ready to go. Doesn't need to come back here, right?
No. Okay, next, access to district facilities, that's our last one, right?
That's the last one.
Okay.
I'm actually just going to draw your attention to the last page of the packet, page 85. We had, if you've been following along, we talked about some adjustments earlier this year. This is a very streamlined version of it, and is intended to, one, on table 2, you'll see hourly rates that are adjusted. Those we do every year as a result of changes to those costs under our contracts, and those with the increases that we have for those particular positions are then reflected in this table 2. In table 1, the facility use charges, these charges are applied when an outside user of a level D or E status, meaning I'm just going to shortcut it, largely for-profit entities are using it. They are charged the facility charge as well as the support staff charge. We're proposing an increase, which we have not done in quite some time. We looked at neighboring districts' charges across, local school districts for the same or similar facilities, and are proposing these adjustments to those rates in Table 1. And that's the extent of this.
Okay, thanks.
Revision.
How does, I wonder, as a level D user, is a 501c3 ever considered a level D user, or are they always up and level A, B, or C? I'm thinking like mainline school nights, and I'm just wondering where they would fit in this, because I know we always have an annual agreement with them for use of our classrooms.
I think largely they would be considered a level C user. We have a different arrangement with mainline school. You want to talk about that? Sorry.
Yeah, there's certain organizations we have a lease agreement with, which are different rates. The mainline school is one of them. It's actually come to the board this month for the upcoming year. What Megan said, call it for profit. I mean, generally speaking, they're the rates that we're going to charge for the for profit. What I mean by that is there are some nonprofits that have activities that they charge a fee and are generating revenue from. In that case, they would pay. But generally, if they're not doing that, Girl Scouts are using, a classroom. We don't charge for that.
When an HSA brings in a for-profit company to do like a Lego lesson or something like that,
charge for that.
Don't charge. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, this is a pretty small subset of use.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's not very often we get individuals or organizations that actually.
So people aren't having weddings in our gym.
We are not.
I see. That's too bad.
Well, we got to think. That's it. We have the Kobe Bryant gym.
Don't get me started.
Yeah.
Or Vic, for that matter.
Is there any comments from the community members in the audience? No. Todd, anything to add?
No.
Okay. Online? No? We're good with this?
I'm really just kidding.
Yeah. I was kidding somewhat. No. Let's just see what our budget looks like next year. Okay. Without closing, Dr. Ranelli has a comment he'd like to make?
Yeah, really quickly. First of all, I want to thank the special services team, Kimberly, Megan Schaefer, the CSE collaboration on the policy. Really wonderful to see the community and the district getting together and working on such important work. Last thing I really wanted to say was, so the larger school county effort of the Special Olympics got canceled, and that's a shame, but Black Rock Middle School picked it up themselves and did it for the kids in their school, and it was wonderful to see yesterday. I was able to go over there for about an hour, and the whole school got behind this effort, and it was really nice. I'd like to thank Ms. Stout and her team and the people there for really going over and above to make kids feel like they belong and to make them feel really good about themselves. It was a wonderful event, and I was really happy I was able to be there, so thank you.
That sounds great. Okay, so I believe that brings the end to our special June 6th meeting of the Policy Committee. And our next meeting, I hope everybody has a good summer, and our next meeting will be in September with date to be determined. Okay, thank you all.